Thank you for joining us once again on the State of Freedom.
The State of Freedom is a listener-supported podcast. We're committed to pursuing the truth about policymaking, regulatory actions, and political maneuvers in Louisiana and at the national level that stand to impact your freedoms.
Please support the State of Freedom by becoming a monthly supporter or member of the Warrior Circle, or by advertising your business, your nonprofit, or your event with us. Go to freedomstate.us. We are bypassing the mainstream media cartel and the establishment political parties in Louisiana and coming directly to you, spreading the uncensored voice of freedom across Louisiana and beyond. Blanco Brothers has been in business in Louisiana for about 30 years now. I have personal experience with this company, and I know others who have as well. If you have a business or a home and you've got roofing, gutter, sheet metal issues at all, one number you need to know, and that's Blanco Brothers Construction. He will treat you right financially, and he will take very good care of you with regard to the quality of the service that he provides. I cannot recommend Blanco Brothers Construction more highly enough. Memorize the number 225-226-4222. Blanco Brothers Construction, the very best in the business.
Good morning, Chris.
Well, good morning. How are you doing today, Danielle?
Good. I saw you got kicked out right before we came on.
Yes, but I'm back.
Okay, welcome back. All right, well, for years, many of us have been asking the same questions. What really happened in the 2020 election, and will anyone ever be held accountable? Can confidence in our elections truly be restored? Now, President Trump says the next chapter is about transparency, declassification, and accountability. So what does that actually mean? Are we going to see new information come to light, and could meaningful reforms finally be on the horizon? Should Americans expect the 2026 midterm elections to proceed as scheduled, or are significant changes still ahead? This morning, Professor David Clements joins us to share his perspective on President Trump's speech, the declass that followed, and what both could signal for the future of America's election system and for every voter in the country. Welcome to the State of Freedom, everybody. It is Tuesday, July 28th. It's 10 a.m. Central. I'm Danielle Walker, and I'm joined by my good friend and co-host, the watchdog-in-chief of Louisiana Citizen Advocacy Group, Chris Alexander, and we are coming to y'all live on Voice of the People USA TV and radio network, on X, Rumble, YouTube, and Facebook. Do all the nice things to share and help us out with the algorithms. Give us a like, give us a retweet, whatever is the nice thing where you are watching. And yeah, definitely share it with your friends. You can also, as you know, catch it later on our audio-only podcast platforms. Let me bring forward Professor Clements. Good morning, sir.
Good morning.
Good to see you.
Great to see you, David. How's everything going?
Good. I'm been really busy. I've been traveling a lot, which is always a good thing, but it's kept me from kind of the normal grind of article writing and video production, which I'd like to get back to. But I've had a whirlwind month, and but really not much to complain about. And I'm really excited to talk about what happened last week and
There
what
you
continues to be released. Bill Pulte has got another round of firings, which is always
Yes.
wonderful to hear. And they've
That's
done
really
a nice job in continuing to declassify information. But there's some things that they're still missing out on, and I want to touch on that today. I've got a little bit of a wild hair that I need to, or an itch I need to scratch on the enemy behind the wire, even in the midst of declassification, which I'm pleased to see, but they're still leaving the door open for the beast to have a place in our elections, and we have to be vigilant.
Wow. Okay, well, before we get into it, let's read the scripture of the day, and then I can't wait to hear your thoughts. The scripture today is 1 Corinthians chapter 2, verses 12 through 16. And it says, "For we did not receive the spirit of the world system, but the Spirit of God, so that we might come to understand and experience all that grace has lavished upon us. And we articulate these realities with the words imparted to us by the Spirit, and not with words taught by human wisdom. We join together Spirit-revealed truths with Spirit-revealed words. Someone living on an entirely human level rejects the revelations of God's Spirit, for they make no sense to him. He can't understand the revelations of the Spirit because they are only discovered by the illumination of the Spirit. Those who live in the Spirit are able to carefully evaluate all things, and they are subject to the scrutiny of no one but God. For who has ever intimately known the mind of the Lord Yahweh well enough to become his counselor? Christ has, and we possess Christ's perceptions." Christ has understood the mind of God, and we possess Christ's perceptions. Isn't that, it's staggering to think about. It's so humbling to think about. And this is a moment in human history, I believe, where perceiving and understanding spiritual realities very well may be a matter of life and death. This is not a time to cling tightly to logic, because the spiritual realm does not operate according to man's logic or to understanding. This is a time to seek the Lord and his wisdom diligently, so we're not only not deceived, but so we can thrive in the middle of this spiritual war. And the answer for how to do that is in Philippians chapter 4, and I'll just read that quickly. Verses 6 through 9, it says, "So this is the answer. Don't be pulled in different directions or worried about a thing. Be saturated in prayer throughout each day, offering your faith-filled requests before God with overflowing gratitude. Tell him every detail of your life. Then God's wonderful peace that transcends human understanding will make the answers known to you through Jesus Christ. So keep your thoughts continually fixed on all that is authentic and real, honorable and admirable, beautiful and respectful, pure and holy, merciful and kind, and fasten your thoughts on every glorious work of God, praising him always. Follow the example of all that we have imparted to you, and the peace of God will be with you in all things." And my encouragement, I guess, and my charge this morning to us is to keep our eyes and our mind fixed on Christ, to pray and to be continually filled with gratitude, because then his peace will not only guard our hearts and minds, but the God of all peace will crush Satan under our feet.
Danielle, how is it that the scripture and the prayer in the morning, which I never know beforehand, always seems to be like a perfect fit? And the reason why it's a perfect fit today is because it dovetails perfectly with the first question that I'm going to ask David today, which is to elaborate, David, on your comment that you made when you were interviewed by Father Andre, which I had the privilege, and I would encourage everybody to watch your recent interview with Father Andre. There was something that you said during that interview that struck me, and it was just such a powerful reminder. It was, you've noticed that in your own life, when you are praised by the world, when you go through periods when you're praised by the world, that it makes you feel uncomfortable. And essentially what you said is, because as Christians, if we're truly walking with Christ, we're not supposed to be praised by the world. At least that should not be the daily staple. Could you talk a little bit more about that and the importance of understanding and being able to discern that oftentimes when the world is praising us, perhaps we need to re-examine what we're doing?
Well, it's a heck of a paradox, right? Because in seeking vindication or validation, you typically want to see the sources that were the biggest progenitors of your slander to do an about face and say, oh, we were wrong and we're sorry. And so there's this weird, I almost feel like someone who's been domestically abused, where my abuser, I'm waiting for the day for my abuser to say something truthful or nice. And I guess the paradox is this, is that that's wrong, because the day that the Washington Post says something glowing about me, the day that NPR says something glowing about me, I'll probably need you to sprinkle me with holy water and perform an exorcism, because how in the world did that happen? So I think there's something beautiful about being acquainted with the approval of one, and that one being Christ. And if you want to expand that to the saints and our brothers and sisters in Christ, that's great for encouragement. I don't carry like this self-loathing where I need people to insult me or or you know just criticize me. That's not what I'm saying. Like, I'm not looking for that. But there's a healthy middle ground where you get around believers and they seem to be acquainted with the truth. There's a spiritual perception, which was something that was really wonderful to hear in the scripture reading this morning, and just having a level of peace with the idea that actually this is a great barometer of spiritual health, to have the world just completely just be at odds with the things that we're doing. And I had a recent article put out, well, two articles put out by Media Matters, which I was so proud of. I mean, it's like, I mean, it just completely, they went after me as, resident crazy. And I'm sitting there going, great. I'm finally back in
I was going to say it's the good old days.
the good old days of
Right,
Media Matters
right.
saying something terrible about me. Like, I feel like I was, and those publications or those articles, when they go out, you never know when or why they pick it up. But I did an interview with David Rutherford, and we were talking about this idea of you know, Trump perhaps using a military tribunal. And most of the time, people just ignore that. So I asked myself, why this time? Because it's not like I shy away from that as being a solution, but why that interview? Did they make it a point to cry wolf? And I think part of it was because of my prediction on the Slaughter case. And for over a year, I mean, I've been on Zoom calls. I'm sitting there going, you want to get to the elegant solution? Just have Trump fire the entire Election Assistance Commission, replace them with a group of people that could decertify the machines right now, and they wouldn't be acting extra legislatively. In other words, the laws are already on the books for them to certify or decertify. You wouldn't need the SAVE Act. And so the Slaughter decision allowed for the firing of a quote unquote independent board or independent agency. And it's constitutional. Now, I recorded that, and it was published, I think, the day before Trump's firing of the entire EAC. So I think that spooked the spooks. It scared them. And it was scary enough for them to where we're getting closer and closer to, I think, real accountability. So every once in a while, I'll say something and it comes to fruition. But that one was way faster than usually I try to be about 6 months ahead of the curve. And that one materialized the next day, and it was pretty cool. And then the other thing is, when Trump was at the Correspondents' Dinner, he kept talking about being, the president in 2028 and running for a fourth term. And so I reposted an article and a video that I put out 8 months ago talking about the pathway to do just that. So it's just weird. You never know when the Holy Spirit will kind of pick up things that you've worked on in the past and give them new life. But if you want to make something newsworthy, it doesn't hurt to have the President of the United States lean into certain things that we've been talking about. And I think we finally arrived to the season in which we are probably most knowledgeable about, which is the elections.
Yeah. Are you feeling I mean, it sounds like you're feeling some level of vindication, but how did you where were you watching President Trump's speech? What were you thinking? How are you kind of reviewing that now?
In a weird way, I didn't watch it. I'm weird like that. I tend to just, like you'd think I would. But I went off and just kind of, I wanted to be with my family. And I
Yeah.
just wanted to kind of just pray through the, because you can just feel it. Like you could feel something is going on behind the scenes that you
Mm-hmm.
know, that you don't have a front row seat. It's not like I was at the correspondence dinner. It's not like I'm front row for the address,
Yeah.
but I know the stakes. I mean, when they reported that this was something that he was going to talk about with the elections, I kind of wanted to just go off and have things come my way. And sure enough, I started getting texts from everyone on this happened and this happened. And that was pretty exciting. And I think the reason why I walked away from it was because I know how important it is. And I know how much it personally affects me. And I know the implications of if we ever saw the day where people were held accountable. I know what that would mean for me and my reputation and, you know, future employment, all those things. So I started going back and watching clips after the fact. And unlike most people that kind of go right to their biases of, I'm going to praise all the things that seem to cement the things that I've been saying, I look for weak points. That's just my personality. Like, what's missing? And can I provide a construct for why perhaps the messaging wasn't what I wanted on certain elements? And you got to be careful even there because you don't want to be delusional. You don't want to be the delusional cheerleader of Trump that's always trying to figure out a way to defend the messaging. But I think I can, and I don't think I'm coming. I don't think I came to that in a way where I feel like I'm selling my conscience short. But it really comes down to, again, this article of faith that you don't reveal the things that that you know to be true because the timing. You want to keep bringing people into your tractor beam before you drop the hammer on them. And I think that's what was going on with Trump. Was there was just enough to set certain things in motion. I think the biggest thing that he set in motion was the legacy media blackout. The fact that they chose not to carry such a significant address concerning national security, that he laid the groundwork for not only the pulling of their licenses, but for an emergency broadcast signal in which no one could now, with a straight face, complain that you didn't give CBS, NBC, et cetera, a fair shot in covering something where they chose not to do it. And that's important if you truly believe that we're going to have this almost biblical intervention into our elections. You need to address the enemy's biggest weapon, which is an outsized megaphone, and have a sufficient narrative context where people can say, "What are you complaining about? How dare you complain about being blacked out of the reporting with after what you did?" So that was the first takeaway for me. And then number two, by using agencies that were instrumental in our own enslavement, to now have declassification coming from the official government seal, you've put the deep state into a quandary because what did they do in 2020, whether it was COVID or the elections? There was always an empty appeal to authority. Chris Krebs of CISA said safe and secure.
Yeah.
Therefore, your lawsuit, Mr. Lawyer, is frivolous. Uh, Good luck with the Rule 11 sanctions while you file a lawsuit on election integrity. When didn't you get the memo? CISA said our elections are safe and secure. And so that's being taken away. The ivory tower, if you will, is being taken away from the deep state. And now the media is they're in convulsions. They're twisting themselves into heavily contorted thing. Well, no, 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 no. That's not the real intelligence agency. That's not the real ODNI.
And
That's
David, just cue the Samantha Guthrie story coming back in.
yeah. Well, it's like that's Trump's ODNI or that's Trump's
Yeah.
CIA. So now they're having to qualify that. Yeah, normally we trust government agencies, but not Trump-led government agencies. So that's been taken off the drawing board. The biggest kind of, I guess, thing that I'm struggling having peace with, but I have faith that Trump's going to launch it at the right time, was there was still too much of a discussion on vulnerabilities. Like, yes, here are the vulnerabilities, but no direct evidence of exploitation of those vulnerabilities. And I think as soon as he gets to that, you don't wait for the media to create its counter talking points. You basically give them the blackout while you release the exploits. And you start arresting people on a massive scale, including the media, because we're talking about seditious conspirators that, in the grand scheme of things, if you're talking about an intelligence agency coup, the most powerful entity within that soft power coup is the media.
Yeah.
And so while it's easy to say, oh, yeah, John Brennan bad, uh, you know, Comey bad, Obama bad, the people that really created the narrative landscape for safe harbor for all of these deep state threats was the legacy media that are being funded in large part by the USAIDs of the world. And yeah, so it's quite fascinating to take a look at that and just try to process it all, because so few are talking about it intelligently.
Yeah.
So few.
Yeah, it's interesting, David. It is, and the element of hypocrisy is absolutely stunning. The media will always appeal to authority, and of course avoid actually having to make an argument because they have the weight of authority behind them when the opinion of the authority is in their favor. But when the opinion of the authority is not in their favor, then of course they debunk it and they try to discredit it. So interesting, they trust the government only when the government does their bidding. And when the government's not doing their bidding and actually trying to come out with real proof, real documentary evidence, not only do they summarily discard it, they don't even listen to the speech. In fact, if I'm not mistaken, I think there was several politicians who already came out with their talking points before the president or the secretary of DHS ever spoke, before any of the documentary evidence was actually unrolled. They had already come up with their talking points, which just tells me they're really not interested in the truth.
And Chris, on your Signal chat this morning, I saw someone say this, and I thought it was absolutely brilliant. It's called pre-bunking.
Pre-bunking, exactly. Yes.
Yeah, one of my favorite headlines is, and if it's even if it's a film, a documentary, or a presidential address, the headline goes something like this: "We watched so and so, so you don't have to," or "We watched the presidential remarks, so you don't have to. We have thought for you. We have discussed this with the Politburo."
Right. We chewed your food. Now you can eat it.
You're right.
Yeah, now
They've built such a safe harbor of trust, haven't they? We've already consulted with the Politburo, and they've given us their ex cathedra pronouncement. So look, go enjoy your recreation. We got this.
we got it.
Oh my God! Well, David? One of the things that struck me particularly about what Mark Wayne Mullins said in his remarks, was about this report that is supposed to be coming out within 30 days. I guess it'll be 2 weeks from now, a little over 2 weeks from now. It's supposed to be coming out with a 30-page report that contains directives for the states in order to secure the voting system, or further secure the voting system in America. Have you thought about what we may expect from this report?
Yeah. The good stuff was he went straight to discussing funding, which is something that I've been seeding for, 6, 7 months now. Uh, Planting the seed of a Scott Bessent with the Treasury saying, oh, non-compliance with the executive orders that are out there concerning elections, you're not going to have funding related to the Help America Vote Act. And while Mark Wayne Mullen wasn't that explicit, he certainly seemed to say something that was very close to that wording. This idea of you're going to work with us or there's going to have to be consequences. And the other thing that was kind of interesting is the declass or the remarks of Mark Wayne Mullen post Trump's address to the nation was that we only had a handful of states to work with. So when your address focuses on 200 million plus voter files being in the hands of the communist Chinese, that should be groundbreaking enough for everyone to cover it. That didn't happen. And then two, they brought up a rather paltry figure of 250,000 non-U.S. citizens being on the rolls. I say, and that's a huge number, but it's paltry based on what we know. And that figure came from 4 states, not 50.
Yeah.
And they certainly weren't the most populous states because you don't have places like California. And so what I expect is that as they provide more and more of the receipts from DHS, that number is going to be in the millions. It has to be. And especially in California, that's been provided sanctuary status for decades with the old scheme of let's go in and get a driver's license in the DMV. No one's checking for our citizenship. I have just enough of the documents that are necessary to have employment in the United States, and by virtue of that, I'm on the voter rolls. And so they gave you concrete evidence that yes, at least 250,000 illegal invaders are on the voter rolls. I mean, it's far more than that. We're probably looking at around 10 million if I had to guess. And if I'm wrong, I've seen enough in the subversion of our voter files that they can be in microseconds. I mean, we've seen the fluctuations where one day you've got an excess of 500,000 that are on the rolls in Michigan alone, and then a day later they're purged and they're sending out emails telling the clerks nothing to see here. And so you see this inflation and temporary purging, to provide this really, really convoluted yet brilliant subversion, where when they're purged, what happens? You've got a news release from a group like Judicial Watch, like, look, we won it. We won something for the good guys here. We got rid of hundreds of thousands of false identities or whatever you want to call it from the voter rolls. And no one ever presses pause and say, would you please check those voter rolls like 1 month from now to see if they've been re-added? And based on the data that we've examined with experts like Chris Jersky, that's exactly what's happening. So, so the good things that I saw from Mark Wayne Mullen was really related to at least aligning with this idea that you can defund fraudsters. That's huge. You didn't ask this question, but I'm going to go there. My criticism, though, was the talking point that we've identified things with the voting machines and we'll be able to provide security patches.
Right.
So we can keep using the machines going forward, provided that we provide patches. That is demonstrably false. And I know for a fact that a gentleman who knows the problem briefed Mark Wayne Mullen the day before he gave his remarks. And there's no way those talking points came from the people that I know, because I know that they understand that the tabulators that we use is one of the chief points of subversion. And so that talking point is alarming. And it was also repeated by John Solomon in many of his reports. And so I'm trying to figure out, okay, is this ignorance? I'm of the mind that you can't afford to be that ignorant when you're the head of DHS.
Yeah.
Is there some nonlinear warfare that's at work here where you don't tell people? Maybe you lull them into a false sense of confidence if you're a Liberty Vote Dominion saying, all right, our scheme's working. We're going to be able to remain in effect, and then pull the rug from them 2 months from now. I hope that's the case. But that is a talking point that's been given life by Alex J. Halderman, who in many respects has provided a lot of fodder for election integrity folks when he hacked a machine in Georgia with a pen. But let it be known right here and now, I don't trust that man at all. I think he is the spook's go-to expert. I think he is creating a limited hangout, third rail of the highest order. And that idea that somehow you could not create massive election fraud through the tabulator is born of his testimony, that it would be too hard to physically breach the tabulators and therefore cause massive fraud. And it runs completely contrary to the findings of nation-state expert Jeff Lindbergh, which is like, no, you're providing a spectacular amount of trust to vendors like Dominion to believe that you can't subvert these machines way upstream.
By tabulators, David, you mean the mechanism that counts the votes?
Yes, those dreaded black boxes, and they
Yes.
take on different forms depending on the
Yes. It's
jurisdiction.
because Halderman, he testified here in Louisiana. It's very intriguing what you say, and you know, it's he when he testified several years ago, he said very clearly that my position is that these computers are vulnerable, and they can be hacked, and therefore my recommendation is that we use hand-marked paper ballots, except in the case of the disabled, which is less than 10% of the population. But I've noticed that he doesn't talk, or I've never heard him talk much about the actual counting of the votes. Is that the criticism of
In
Halderman?
part, okay, so in Georgia, keep in mind that most of the controversy was over the type of Dominion machine, which were ballot marking devices. These were ballot marking tabulators in the sense that you touch a screen and the ballot's got a QR code. So after you touch the screen, it prints out a piece of paper that reflects your votes. And then you take that piece of paper and you feed it into a tabulator. It's a very weird extra step or extra layer. And so most of Halderman's testimony was, let's get away from this ballot marking device. Let's get away from this QR code technology. And he's right for all of those reasons. But when you live in other jurisdictions, like I do in New Mexico, where we have paper ballots, we don't use ballot marking devices. But rigged software is rigged software. I don't care if you've got something that appears to be more secure. All I know is that we have seen paper ballots be subverted through the use of these tabulators. And so there's this fiction that's being created that, oh, if we use paper ballots, we're safe. No, the problem is they keep being thrown through that black box, and that's what's doing the counting for us as opposed to our eyeballs. So that's an affirmation of where you're at. My problem with the Halderman testimony is that he ignores that the biggest threat vector comes from the vendors themselves. So in other words, no one from Dominion is showing up in person with some air-gapped, USB on, here's your ballot definition file. They're sending these things through the internet. And the ballot definition file is basically the poison pill that you're going to introduce into the tabulators, because in order to get prepared for an election, at some point the clerk in the local jurisdiction has to create and prepare the ballot that's going to be used. And so how do they do that? They do that through software. And so at some point, once they've monitored who's come through a state convention or a caucus, or when the dust settles, you have the folks that will appear on the ballot. So they have to program that, and they do that with this thing called a ballot definition file that's provided by the vendor. But it's not this narrow thing. What they provide to them has a drop-down menu with 200 different options. There's no way. There's no one that's actually doing their due diligence on the ballot definition file that's being provided by the Dominions of the world. And so, when you look at the last line of defense to make sure that that file is secure, you're left in the hands of two testing agencies, ProVNV and SLI Compliance, which we know for a fact let their accreditation lapse, that they don't have adequate staffing to do the things that we're told that they can do. We've seen the size of their offices, their footprint doesn't match reality on what you would need from a testing standpoint. We've heard testimony from people like Clay Parikh where they're just not qualified to do the testing. So in other words, you've got the delivery of the file to every clerk in America, whether it's Dominion, ES&S, they're putting that file into their election management system, which is networked, or they're introducing it into the tabulator that's supposed to be a closed system, not hooked to the internet. But now you've created a mechanism for subversion that doesn't need the internet, that can turn that machine from an election device to a selection device. And Halderman, this guy that's an expert on telling us all of the myriad of ways that you can infiltrate these machines, gives a complete pass to that vector being a possibility. Are you kidding me? Wow. I mean, we're talking about the Eric Coomers of the world, that these are guys that hate America, that were card-carrying members of Antifa. Like, you're not going to even give that lip service as a legitimate vector for subversion. And so that flies in the face of Lenberg's expert testimony, especially in Antrim. And so Lenberg is kind of, in my opinion, the real patriot expert on the machines, and Halderman is the one that you roll out for just enough confusion, just enough credibility with his legitimate expertise. But that's a huge tell.
Yeah. And the difference, David, is that not interrupt you. The difference is that it sounds to me like at bottom, the difference is that Halderman does not want to criticize these vendors themselves. Whenever he talks about cyber attacks, it's always these sophisticated criminal cyber attackers that everyone can view as a common enemy, but it's never internal. It's never the vendors themselves. And obviously, he's very reluctant to include them among the nefarious actors.
I'll do you one better. During 2020, it was Halderman that was reaching out through email correspondence to Dominion, including Eric Coomer, on how to help them provide their narrative troubleshooting.
So not only is he not criticizing them, he at least appears to have been acting in collusion with the vendors.
If you ask me, yes. So for me, like Philip Stark, Harry Hursty, Alex Halderman were kind of the three elections experts that during Trump's first term would show up in these Democrat uniparty funded documentaries about the legitimate vulnerabilities of our elections. And they were planting the narrative seeds that in the event that Trump did something like seize the tabulators in 2020, they would have provided all of the narrative primacy to legitimately, throw shade at the presidency. Like, how can we trust anything that's coming out of Trump's mouth if he seized the tabulators based on what these experts warned us about? And then Trump did the unthinkable. He didn't seize the machines. And it was like everyone quickly grabbed Halderman, Hursty, and Stark and put them into a cupboard, never to be heard from again, while Biden was installed. And every once in a while, you'd pull them out into circulation, but it was for limited hangout narratives on, well, maybe there's a very deft way where we make it look like we're for election security, but we're not really going to ever get rid of the underlying software subversions from the vendors. So, yeah, we'll get rid of the ballot marking device in Georgia, and it will show everyone the vulnerabilities of the ballot marking device, but we'll never talk about the elephant in the room, which is the vendor itself. And so if you're there to hold water for Dominion, I'm sorry, like try to find something that's critical from an Alex J. Halderman about the vendors themselves. You'll be
Exactly.
hard pressed to find it unless they're in a room playing to a room, but just from official publications. And so there's a little bit of that going on in the Bill Pulte declassifications. It's widely correct from the standpoint of vulnerabilities in the poll books, the voter rolls. But for whatever reason, there's something in there in black and white that says, we don't really believe the voting machines, the tabulators, can be subverted to a degree that has widespread effects. And I'm like just sitting there like that's not true. The subversion in Antrim County with the 7,000 votes that shifted was by virtue of tabulator subversion. That was the finding of Jeff Lemberg. And the reason why we can prove that is that it was one of the few jurisdictions where we got access to the machines that were used. But don't tell me that it hasn't happened. It's absolutely happened. So what I see is if they're ready to get rid of the poll books and some of the other things that do need to be get rid of, we need to get rid of the poll books. We need to get rid of all of the electronic attendant products. But you hold on to the tabulator. I think what Team Evil's doing is like they see the emergence of AI having a perch in our elections that can really do everything that these other software pieces can do and do it better or worse, depending on your idea of the
Right.
purpose of AI. So I would not be surprised if we have all of these elements of the system that are eliminated, and we're all sitting there going, "Wow, this is improvement. This is incremental improvement because now we don't have the e-poll books." Okay, well, what role does AI play at that point? And so I'm looking at two things constantly, which is what are the front end subversions to basically set the stage through the use of the black boxes, and at the end of election, do you still have a process to overwrite everything, or at least create the false perception of reality based on data that you see on a screen? And from my standpoint, the tabulator subversion is your front end risk, and then AI, if it replaces total vote, if AI replaces VR system or electionware, all of the different software that we see now, you haven't improved the election terrain. If anything, you've probably made it worse. And so we have to constantly be on the lookout for these more elegant subversions as the technology improves. I mean, you use Grok and you put in a search query, and in microseconds, you've got the greatest summation of data that we've ever had at our disposal. To think that processing power can't be leveraged in our elections is just
Exactly.
the height of absurdity.
100%. And you mentioned, David, at the outset that you had an itch you wanted to scratch about the enemy behind the wire. Have you touched on that yet? Because I want to make
Yeah,
sure
that
you
was
get it in.
basically it.
Okay. All right,
Yeah.
So
cool.
on that point, David, you said that Mullen was actually briefed on all of this the day before he gave his press conference. In his press conference, he came right out and said that there's a backdoor mechanism to manipulate votes inside these systems, and votes can be switched back and forth. Uh, and you don't think that implicit in that comment was a criticism of what you're talking about here, the actual tabulators?
Well, he recognized the vulnerability, but then he said that we can patch, like we're just learning about, you know, we're just learning now about these backdoors.
Yeah.
I don't think that's true. And the good news is, based on what we know, we now know we can go out and patch these vulnerabilities, and that right there is the lie. Now he could be very careful in his wordsmithing, and I'll grant him that. But there's no patching the tabulator.
Yeah.
There's
And
no way
I'd
to
like to
patch.
think, David, that what you mentioned a few minutes ago, and what Dr. Russ, Randy Russ, said when he came on the show a week or two ago that this could be sort of an interim step in order to achieve the ultimate objective, which is to decertify all of the computer-based voting systems. I mean, I think there's a chance that Trump already knows and Mullen already knows that really there is no way to fully secure these systems, but they perhaps want to at least, and I'm sure they are acting in good faith, but they want to demonstrate their good faith in at least perhaps making an effort to secure the current system, but knowing that ultimately, in all likelihood, they're going to come to the conclusion that they're not safe. But they can say that, look, we tried.
That's entirely possible, and I'm hoping that that's the case. This kind of goes back to what I said about if you're shaping the landscape and giving people a false sense of security,
Yeah.
then that makes perfect sense if you're going to do the rug pull down the road. And so I struggle with my responsibility as a civics-oriented U.S. citizen that's not read in. Do I just keep my trap shut and say trust Trump's picks, or do I say, hey, I hope this is the case, but this idea of patches is BS, and I'm going to call it. It's not, to me, it's not disloyalty to Trump and the plan. It's just there needs to be enough organic discussion about the truth and the threat vectors that if in the unfortunate event that I'm wrong about Markwayne Mullin and he is playing for the other side, at least we've had years worth of discussions that vindicate the truth. It's not so much about whether I need to be held in some type of glorious harmony with the Trump administration. And I've tried to pick my battles. And so there's two possibilities. One, Markwayne Mullin and some of these folks with their false talking points. And I'm just talking about patches right now. It's demonstrably untrue. And I'm going to say that as many times as it needs to be said. If there's an idea of misdirection and the lulling of the enemy into a place where I think we're going to survive the last 2 years of Trump's term only to keep these things in place with patches, and then Trump's gone and we can restart the machine and put it in overdrive, that's a possibility. But one of the things that I've said many times on your show and other shows is that the whole turnover that we're seeing at DHS, the DOJ, doesn't bother me. I mean, Markwayne Mullin was the replacement for Kristi Noem, right? And I know people in South Dakota that were sitting there telling me day one she's not someone that they trust, and these are people that have just followed her ascendancy to the governor's mansion, all those things. And then you find out that, she had the whole drama with her husband who's cross-dressing, and she had to step down and kind of disgrace because he was a blackmail target. And so without that spiritual revelation, you're sitting there going, how in the world can we place faith or trust in any of Trump's picks if Christie's out, Pam Bondi's out? A lot of people are still concerned about Blanche being the real deal. I think we've seen good things and bad things. Tulsi's out, who we all liked, but now you've got Pulte in. And if you want to do just a superficial analysis, you'd say that this is an administration that is in constant flux, and this is in some ways reminiscent of the 2016 cabinet selection, where you've got the rotating hot seat. And so if you're just appealing to your naturalistic tendency to view things with what your eyes see and what your ears hear, how can you not be completely rocked emotionally? Like, this doesn't look like any sense. There's no sense of coherence in any of this, unless you're sitting there going, military's the only way. And if the military is the only way, and none of these really have a bearing on the military, I'd say Pulte is the exception, or it was Tulsi as a pivot person providing intelligence to the military, or vice versa. Then it's like, okay, let everyone be distracted, let everyone be confused, and that actually creates a perfect scenario for Trump to come in when people least expect it, which is consistent with nonlinear warfare. You don't telegraph the most valuable targets. And the thing that I'm talking about on your show, to me, is one of the most valuable targets. So in some ways, I can make a case for why I totally get what Trump did through his remarks, if that's the case. I think he knows. In fact, I know he knows, but it's still one of those things where in the confines of the social media echo chamber, I'm constantly seeing the proliferation of bad talking points and elements within conservative Inc. that are continuing to give life to the use of the machines going forward.
Yeah.
Yeah.
David, your suspicion, and it sounds like your suspicion about perhaps even Mullen himself, is that based upon just the pattern that you've described here, or is that based in part on anything particular that you've heard about Mullen?
Okay, so for me, it's really simple. My litmus test is really, really simple. When the soft power coup took place in 2020, who stood up and said, did y'all see the coup? That's it.
Yeah.
I don't recall Mark Wayne Mullen standing up and calling a spade a spade. I remember him giving cover for the Capitol Police security personnel that murdered Ashley Babbitt. I remember some of the talking points with respect to the J6 prisoners that was just disgusting. And unfortunately, you see that with a lot of the folks that were in, positions that later Trump, hired many of these folks.
Yeah.
So that I will never forget. I will never forget what took place on January 6th and what the people that had discernment and didn't. Now, could you persuade me that some of the folks that are part of Trump's team now were playing the long game, even as improbable as that may seem? Yes, I think you could persuade me on some people. If for no other reason, if you've come to the conclusion that 2020 was a sting operation and your goal is to prosecute former presidents or presidential candidates, then you better have some insiders that had access to information that no one else did. You cannot carry the day in a military commission against a Barack Obama with hearsay, or with just, you're going to need someone like John Bolton, who just was convicted under the Espionage Act, to tell everyone everything. You're going to need a Maduro to spill the beans. You're going to need all of these things to carry the day, not from a standpoint of a captured media, because they'll never report fairly. But if you had a blackout, if you had an emergency broadcast, if you had arrest, you need something that will satisfy the history books going forward. That's really the case that Trump has to make, is that whatever he does, history will have to look at it and say, wow, this is evidence unlike any that we've ever seen. This is testimony from people that were
On the inside.
on the inside. And this is where you start getting into some of the stuff that was been put out by Q. And I would really encourage people to stop walking past something that's keeps vindicating itself. And there are these very, very odd posts, and they're like, trust Ray. I'm like, what do you mean trust Ray? I was in the Rayburn building when he was giving testimony, and he's enemy number one to the J6 community. But what are we hearing about every other day? Like, oh, by the way, we found another burn bag. We found a hidden room in the FBI. Like, who would corroborate that? So if you ended up having a military commission, Nuremberg 2.0, it would be extremely compelling if Chris Wray comes forward as a whistleblower on behalf of the corruption of the agency he led. John Bolton being the whistleblower as the national security advisor, that every war hawk used him as your pivot man. Then all of a sudden you're looking at super compelling testimonial evidence where there's been so much historical friction between Trump and these people that it's really hard to accuse Trump of, you know, just using his yes men, because it's so counterintuitive even for me. So if
Yeah.
that's true, and then you had other people like Trust Kansas. Kansas was known as kind of the code name for Mike Pompeo, who's another guy that spectacularly dropped the ball on elections. This is you've had Joe Altman on your show. He briefed counsel for Mike Pompeo the day before the runoff election. And so, is there this tactical patience where people have always known the truth, and what they've been waiting for is the civilian class to organically come to an understanding that was earned? Because I'll tell you right now, as a teacher, if you don't earn it and you don't do the thinking yourself, you won't retain it.
Yeah.
And I've always said that you can't expect Trump to save us, have the military run an election, and if we didn't come to the same conclusion that this is real and really understand all of the myriad of threat vectors for the election system, you're giving yourself a 4-year shelf life only to be undone because we never quite learned, our predicament. And I don't think that's the case anymore. So is this speculative? Wildly. It's wildly speculative, what I'm saying. But there is this thing within this highly integrated PSYOP, which is Q, that suggests that don't be surprised, don't be shocked when people that you've loathed for years could very well be the persons that do the most damage. And whether that was gained by compliance because of blackmail, or people understood that these guys maybe they were given offers years ago that you're going to play ball for us because we've got the video of you
Right.
doing something disgusting on a trip to China. It could be all of the above. So I admit that this is speculative on my part, but the reason why I'm willing to go there is John Bolton. John Bolton was not just arrested, he was convicted under the Espionage Act. And his security clearances would have been thus where I guarantee you he was communicating with all of the enemies of the Trump administration. Guarantee you. And the one thing that was, made known was there was no jail time. It was like a $2 million fine, depending on his financial resources. Okay. What do you have to give up to be guaranteed that you're not going to go to prison for the rest of your life?
What was the deal?
100%. Yeah.
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 And David, I really love this wild speculation for a couple of reasons. One is it goes to your earlier argument about the appeal to authority, that and the hypocrisy within the media. These are the guys. These are the authority figures, the ones that you're naming, the Chris Wray and the John Bolton, that the media trots out at every opportunity to debunk whatever it is Trump's saying, right? So it would be so beautiful to see that. And then the other piece of it is if you look at the COVID experience, so many people just blindly followed. Almost everyone just believed, the initial official narrative, and then people started unwinding from that over time. If you were to if Trump were to do something so dramatic like you described, with the military taking over the elections all of a sudden, right? And people coming out of nowhere with no context for anybody, we would be in the same position as COVID, where everybody's just like, okay, I guess this is what we're doing. We don't understand why. We have no grip on reality, and we're just gonna, and you could see the demons' heads spinning out of control. and then we would be in the same exact position, as soon as the next election cycle rolled around, because people had no opportunity to understand what was really at stake. And so I wanted to, I don't know, give my commentary on that. I love it. I just love
Well,
it.
And it's a great point, Danielle, because what you're basically describing is, and this you talked about the military. The example you used was the military taking over. I'll get back to my point about ultimately decertifying the elections. I think what you're describing here is a process whereby the American people can be educated a bit more precipitously and incrementally before decisions of that magnitude are made.
yes. So I was listening to a mutual friend of your show and me, Brigadier General Blaine Holt, and I listened to him this morning. And it's really great when a civilian former law professor is in lockstep with a retired general on all the things that are taking place. And I think what separates me from most of the hopium filled people out there that just want what I'm saying to be true is I do an analysis and work backwards from, okay, this is the end goal. Like, what does justice look like? Real justice.
Yeah.
And what does victory look like? And then I start thinking, what would it take? What machinery would have to be in place to get to that end goal? And so the only reason why I will entertain something that is largely derided, whether it's Q or I'll entertain the military tribunal stuff, is because when I look at the ways to get there, to get to accountability, I'm not speculating about how you get there with the DOJ. You can't. Anyone that's tried a basic felony case, it's the norm. A basic case is a year to year and a half. I'm talking about like garden variety DUI or, a trafficking case with 2 pills of some controlled substance. You're looking at a year and a half in the pipeline of our current justice system before you get to a trial, and sometimes it's 2 years. Okay, so here we are, 2 years away from the end of the term. So when I tell people, like, I'm not trying to be an agent of demoralization, but I'm telling you right now, I don't care what your grand conspiracy case looks like in Florida. You're not getting it done with that system. And so that's forced me to get outside of my comfort zone and look at this military canon, this military law, and say, okay, is it possible here? And it's like, not only is it possible, the efficiency that I've seen through historical documentation is off the charts. Now, will they break the mold in 2026 and make what we've done in the past look like child's play? I absolutely believe that. But it's not born of delusion. It's actually born of reality. Like, you can't do the things that people want. So that's why, again, I don't really get upset with the turmoil on civilian systems, because you can't use them. So yeah, if people want to, be black-pilled and think that Trump's an idiot, great. But I've seen enough courting of the Q phenomena through the Department of War and all of the government agencies on X, where I'm sitting there going, okay, either this guy is the meanest, most duplicitous person, being Trump, either he's the Antichrist for doing that, or perhaps he is telling you the entire time that this has always been the plan. And the fact that the legacy media can't even go there and talk about the connections between what the White House is posting on its official accounts on Trust the Plan and Where We Go One, We Go Quantum, and all these things. It's astonishing. And it also tells me that we, the people, are still largely brainwashed because the legacy media has commented on the Q phenomena as this crazed conspiracy theory. It's like, on the one hand, you guys realize what you're doing? Like, you'll tell me you don't trust the media at all on anything, but you have implicitly taken on the biases of their commentary about the Q phenomena. It's like, how do you reconcile that? And so, whatever it is the boogeyman. I mean, I want to be clear. Q is the boogeyman. And it's got a lot of people going crazy right now. And so if you're a conservative MAGA person that doesn't have the intelligence to understand it, that's just pride. That's just actually someone's stupidity showing that I can't understand it. And I'm so used to taking legacy media sources for my education on a topic, and therefore you're misinformed and you completely missed the boat on it. Or you've got crazed legacy media outlets that are turning it into a caricature that, oh, everyone is this satanic pedophile cartel ring, that like they turn it into something that it's certainly all of those things, but to lump everyone within this huge spectrum of corruption into that elitist kind of Luciferian manifestation isn't accurate. It's accurate to some degree, but it's not accurate for everyone. So I'm fascinated by it. I still believe, and I've gone on record saying that the Q phenomenon will be the most studied psyop going forward, and I think it's divinely inspired. I'll go a little bit further. I'll really give you guys some fodder for people to write for Media Matters to write an article about me with this this
Right.
interview.
Well, that'll do it. That'll do it.
I've been giving a lot of thought to the idea of the spiritual realms that, as Christians, we need to take stock of, whether it's third heaven. Paul saying, I know a man who was called up to third heaven, whether in person or whatnot, I do not know. And he's speaking of himself. And this idea of second heaven warfare, on that buffer between what we see in the natural and what's going on in the throne room of God. And you look at the book of Daniel and the intercession of the archangel Michael coming to the aid to depose the prince of Persia, another demonic entity. You have all of this stuff in the Bible. And I'm sitting there going, okay, so there's reference to this guy named Michael. And he's real. He's as real as anything that we've read in the Bible. And then you understand his charge is to be the safekeeper of Israel. And when I say Israel, I mean, I'm talking about the line that was fulfilled in Christ.
Yeah.
And so he's got to do something that's amazing to make preparations for return of his king, our king. And so he is the warrior of all warriors. He is the general of all generals. So maybe you can see where I'm going here. If something that's divinely inspired from a nonlinear psyop type of warfare, why would we preclude that from the equation in the battle between Satan's empire and God's kingdom? So I've come to the conclusion, again, this is speculation on my part, but I like thinking about these things I don't like thinking about problems purely based on my natural senses. I want to tap into the fairy tale. I want to tap into the spiritual vision of, okay, God, you're real. Christ, you're reigning. Your angels are real. Your legions are real. How are you ministering to us? How are you helping us? Who are you tapping on the shoulder? Who did you know before the foundations of the earth were set would be a hero of the day in the epoch that we're in right now, whether it's a Trump, whether it's someone else? And what are the tools that you're going to give us to use that will help us combat evil? And so that's the thing that I'm thinking about with respect to these psyops, is what's the psyop of all psyops that's going to get us out of the entanglement that we are in, where we are effectively being confronted with a country, an idea of our country that's never been accurate, that none of us here have ever experienced a constitutional republic in our lifetimes. It's not even close.
Right.
a place that has normalized the murder and betrayal of JFK, and the lie is so baked into the fabric of reality that it's all lies. Everything that we know has been built on just this pile of lies, and here we are on the brink of something that's going to peel back all of that and give us our reset, a biblical reset for the kingdom, is really exciting.
Yeah.
It is really exciting.
Yeah, I agree with you, and I share your optimism based upon what I see. I have to ask you though about the DOJ. You mentioned a little while ago the time frame that's involved in prosecuting even a garden variety criminal case on the federal level. Not to mention the sort of complex and gargantuan prosecution that would be required against these nefarious actors that we're talking about here. It would just be extraordinary. So, is your suggestion, David, that the DOJ, even if they were inclined to indict these top level bad actors, uh, in a civilian court, that they don't have time left to do it?
Okay, so with the current state of our elections, no. But if you believe that there is an answer to the corruption and that the midterms won't lead to an impeachment, I mean, so let's say that we don't fix any of the election infrastructure, and now Trump's not even on the ballot, so you don't get to have the same excitement where everyone can rightly distill that, okay, with Trump, we've got a chance as a nation. Without him, we're screwed. Like most people
Yeah.
could implicitly understand that.
And still believe that?
Well, yeah, and I can't. I think of Butler, and I remember the bullet grazing his ear, and the reason why no one fled or left is because they knew that the fortunes of the nation were dependent on whether that guy stands up again. I mean,
Yeah.
like their fear of losing him was greater than their fear of being hit with a stray bullet.
Yeah.
That's how important Trump is. Now, if he's not on the ticket, and that's another big if, right, for 2028, you're left with uniparty hacks that none of us are inspired by. But let's say that they don't fix it. Let's say that we're still in the land of Mark Wayne Mullen talking about vulnerabilities instead of providing proof of exploitation. Then Democrats are going to get the House. They're going to get the Senate because they have got no choice but to wield those weapons in an even more reckless fashion than how they wielded them in 2020. And then you're looking at impeachment. You're looking at
Yeah.
the
You're
death.
looking at a gutted uh, administration at
Okay,
that point.
so under that premise, it's pretty apocalyptic. I don't think we're going there. I don't think Trump's going to let us get to that. So let's speculate what happens if we save the elections. We have massive vacancies. We've got a convention that actually makes sense in an off year where you're filling those massive vacancies. Now you're not working with a 2-year window.
The
You're working
RNC
the
is.
RNC. Now you're working with a 6-year window because you get another four years. Hopefully, with President Trump, based on my wildest fantasy, which is he's still technically in his first term under a continuity of government framework. And the idea that he stepped down as president and devolved into a commander in chief role would effectively put a stop on the timer on how you count terms because the Constitution tells you it's a 4-year term. Well, what if you're not the president, but you are the commander in chief because your government has been largely captured, and the only people that seem to understand that are his military advisors and the generals? What triggers the start of that clock? I'm in the camp that it's not the 2024 election. And I think one of the proof points for this was notice how he didn't swear a new oath. He didn't put his hand on the Bible.
Yeah.
Most people speculate that's because he's the Antichrist. No. He's not going to swear inconsistent oaths. And a rigged election cannot be a second rigged election, even though he got in, cannot be constituted as victory.
Right.
He has to overcome his enemies. So we're already seeing at least a narrative landscape where we're having these very, very rich discussions on whether it's possible. And normally I think people could rightly say, you're insane, Clements. You're insane for talking about it. Except for that's what Trump was talking about nonstop during the correspondence dinner.
Yeah.
It's like, okay, so what do you mean fourth term? So like it's confusing because I'm sitting there going, it would be either a fourth term unless it's a continuation of the first term. And so all this to say, Chris, that if this is a military operation, which I believe it is, if this is a continuation of his first term, not only do you have 6 years, you've got 6 years potentially with the same guy that we trust, that being Trump. I do not think Trump will risk, and this is the first time I've said this out loud, the idea of a J.D. Vance or a Marco Rubio turning their campaigns for presidency into a possible creation of a lame duck 2 years. Because again, as soon as you start pointing to the future, your influence as the commander-in-chief evaporates. I don't think we can go through this situation and defeat the enemy, secure our elections, and then give the handoff to an unknown. So I think the plan has to be another term with Trump, and people are going to have to wrap their minds around this idea that the crazy people like Clements might just be right. And then you're looking at a successor to Trump that is military approved, that's all about consolidating the victories and making sure that we've got hope going forward. In that scenario, now you're not talking about 6 years, you're talking about 12 years, 16 years to carry out prosecutions where the statute of limitations is already triggered by virtue of the fact that you're in the pipeline because there's an indictment. So you don't have to worry about the length. I've presided over murder cases that took 7 years. But I think where the leverage comes from is just like in Nuremberg, you'll notice that there's 22 accused defendants in the first slate of the Nuremberg trials. At the end of the day, it was, just shy of, I think, 200 for the full number of people that were tried in a series of trials. You're going to need something like that. You're going to need at least 22 of your hardest hitters, your Obamas, your Faucis, and the world sees that the penalty for that is death. And when they see that, then all of a sudden, is it Joe Geneva? I think he's the guy who is looking at the grand conspiracy case. It now has tremendous power, but it's not of his own making. It's because of something that happened in an independent tribunal, and people start looking at the penalties in the civil system and then compare them to what awaits you if you're in the tribunal line. And when you have that, so when you get back to these truth posts of Trump saying, who wants to see a televised tribunal with Barack Obama? That there's trolling, and then there's you can't do that as the current president unless you're going to see that through. Then all of a sudden you don't have to worry about trying in a grand conspiracy case 10,000 swamp rats. They're all begging for the plea deal that caps them at 20 years, and then with good time maybe they're out in 10.
Yeah.
Then all of a sudden there's a perfect place for the DOJ. That's
in fact,
the way that
many of them will be begging for it. You're saying?
Yeah. Oh yeah, mercy, anything that we can get. And so, like, again, I don't pretend to know how reasonable it is to suggest that you've got insiders like a Ray or a Kansas or Pompeo, et cetera, or even Bolton. But let's agree, let's just for the sake of argument and all agree that they're not good people.
Okay.
And it's very unlikely. Is there a possibility where you've got dirt on people, and Trump basically confronted through the military these people that were effectively working for the Communist Party of China, and say, here's your chance to avoid a room right there with a noose that's waiting for you, because we don't have to publicize any of our criminal proceedings within the military. Don't have to do it. And this is how you save yourself. You're going to be basically under house arrest for the pendency of this operation. You're going to go out and you're going to use scripted talking points that we give you. And if you comply, you'll live, and perhaps you can even rewrite history a little bit to where your greatest sins and betrayal of our nation can be redeemed for something great. That might be a pitch that at least appeals to someone's sense of self-preservation. I can almost believe that that's possible. What I have a harder time believing is that if you don't have that dirt, that someone would be willing for the American public to believe that they're effectively the worst form of human being, and they've got a heart of gold that could survive the slander over such a long period of time. I don't believe that that person exists. I think the closest thing that we have to it would be a Donald Trump. And the only reason why I think he maintains his sanity is that this operation isn't just him. It's obviously a team. And I think he's had the remarkable confidence that he is the man of our times. He is our Lincoln. He is our Washington. And that I think whatever operation has been in effect, I think the military would concede one day, maybe they'll say it out loud, that without this man, there was no way to carry out this great deliverance of our nation.
Yeah.
And David, I want to pull on this thread and go back to the spiritual aspect that you were mentioning before, just kind of the spiritual reality that is completely unseen, that may be orchestrating some of this. And maybe it is visible to some certain people, right? Like in a very tangible way. I believe that's possible. But there's a scripture that came to mind, and I don't remember the reference, but it's that all of creation yearns on tiptoe for the revealing of the sons of God. And I think that's the moment that we're in. And if you believe that scripture, then it's very plausible. It becomes extremely plausible that there's angelic help informing plans, that there's that heaven's strategy is being downloaded to people to see what they will do with it. I think that's incredibly plausible.
Well, I'll do you one better. Let's say that for everyone that's still struggling, that's watching this, saying, okay, I really believe that David has lost his last marble. I can do that. Well, I'm going to give you even more ammunition right now. I am, for the first time in my life, being confronted with eschatology, end times theology, and that's something that I've avoided. If for no other reason, I just don't feel like it's like, okay, he's coming. We're told that we're not going to know the day, the hour. And if that's the case, then just keep my hand at the plow. And when he comes, I want to be working where he says, well done.
Yeah.
And that's enough for me. I don't need to really get into timelines and all those things. But when you start looking at seasons, where we can know the season but not the day or not the hour, the idea of the return of Christ that we profess to believe, and yet we don't live in a way that's a reality. I mean, we don't live with that urgency. Can you imagine what would have to come to pass to make preparations for something that is such a divine mystery? Then all of a sudden, it's like all the things that I'm talking about are actually rather benign. I mean, we're talking about the return of Christ. When? And I think the year, if you do the math, as far as the 2,000 years, a day is 1,000 years, puts us right around 2033 from his earthly ministry. And I'm not saying that that's the day that Christ returns, but as far as a threshold in the spiritual keeping of time,
Yeah.
we're very close to this idea. And then, so it begs the question of, all right, what do you ascribe to, Clements? Do you ascribe to premillennialism? Do you amillennialism, postmillennialism? And I didn't even really know what those terms meant. But I'll share with you the one that stirs my heart and makes me really happy. Okay, and again, if for folks that are vested in this, if you think I'm wrong, that's fine. I'm perfectly fine with being wrong on this too. I love the idea that Christ's 1,000-year reign isn't some cosmic thing in the clouds where it's just from heaven.
Right.
I love the idea of him coming in the midst of his creation and spending 1,000 years where the best is truly yet to come. And the proof point for that I'm very, very convinced by, and of course this would be the premillennial view, he's coming back, is he has to redeem all of the failures of Adam. And what did Adam not do? He didn't exercise dominion and the governing of this planet with God the Father. He failed. And so a lot of times what we do as believers is we look at spiritual fulfillment of prophecies, but we don't take God at his word that this actually happens in the physical world. And that forces you to start looking at the first coming, like who got it right, who got it wrong. And it's widely speculated, and if this is reminiscent of the work of John Bevere, let me just say that, yes, I've been influenced by John Bevere's take on this, which is you had the Essenes, which were basically the true blue exiles of the church that cared the most about the coming of Christ. And it was widely speculated that John the Baptist was an Essene, that Mary, by virtue of their familial relationship, was an Essene. And these folks not only predicted the first coming of Christ, they predicted it to the week.
Wow.
And so they were waiting with anticipation and in urgency. And so when Mary shows up with the baby Jesus, you had people that are waiting and seeing her for who she was, and more importantly, seeing the Christ for who he was. And you had to think, okay, talk about like how many people got it wrong. The entire religious class got it wrong. The Pharisees got it wrong. And it was a death sentence to some degree to tell everyone that this was the Messiah. That's why they had to flee and go into Egypt, etc. So here we are 2,000 years later on the verge of the second coming. And I'm wondering, well, who are the people that are your modern day John the Baptist, the Essenes, that won't know the day or the hour, but will know the season? And what does that look like to make preparation for the fairy tale? And so, like, I love the idea that we could be in the midst of a threshold. Maybe we still got to go through the hallway to get to another door. But I love the idea of being in a threshold that where, maybe I'm 90, maybe I'm 100 years old, but I get to see Christ come back and govern for 1,000 years. And we played a role, the American people, through this great deliverance through the Holy Spirit, to just hold on long enough to give a template of something beautiful to come. Yeah. And this doesn't mean that we're not going to have the taking away of the church for a time. I think it's the church that actually holds back, the enemy. And what would happen if the church was gone? If we want to use the term rapture, you can use that. But the point being, we saw an element of how perverse the demonic was in 2020, did we not? And could you imagine if there weren't spirit-filled believers that were here in 2020, how quickly our society would degrade into absolute apocalyptic hell? And so I think what we're seeing is the possibility of this beautiful reign where we get to walk in the cool of the day with our Savior, to govern in the affairs in a way that's so beautiful. And when it's time for him to lift the restraints on those that need to be judged into eternity, It's not him. It's basically, I'm going to take the church because you're the body. You are my hands and feet in restraining evil. And when we're gone, you've got your 3.5 years, 7 years of just hell on earth before God comes back. Now, he's protected his bride, which is what a good husband would do. Why would you let your bride be slaughtered in the midst of hell? No, you
Right.
take them, you protect your bride, and now you come back with the sword. So like this vision, this fairy tale, this dream, like I want to be someone, if I'm accused of madness, like I really want to do my part in anticipating the return of the king in a way that isn't just book reading or it's just not my imagination. Like, is it possible that we live in those last days where we will see him? And boy, that's sobering. That changes your preparations. That
Yeah.
changes the way that we talk about things. And it gives life to the ridiculous things that I admittedly think that we're talking about this morning, which is, could a plan be so amazing that we could see deliverance in this nation and in the world? And so I think it's completely compatible with the faith. So I've been babbling and giving you kind of what I've been reminiscing on and or thinking about, and that's okay. I'm going to keep reading this Bible as if it's real, and if I'm wrong, who cares?
Well, David, his ways are so far above our ways that I think that we have just a microcosmic understanding of what he is all about ultimately. But I do know that I pray and hope that I am, and I'm sure that others pray and hope that whenever he does return, for how long he returns, that we can say that we were on the right side, and that we fought for him and for his purposes. And if I can say that, then I think I will feel vindicated. That
Yeah,
if we're fighting on the right side, and I think it's so important that we continue to examine, continue to make sure that we are just as honest with ourselves and our motives and our purposes and our objectives as we are with others. And just make sure that as Danielle says, that our motives are pure and that we're doing the right thing for the right reasons. Yeah, unlike T.S. Eliot said the last temptation and the ultimate treason is to do the right thing for all the wrong reasons. And I want to do the right things for all the right reasons, and hopefully we'll be on the right side. In the end, I think
amen.
we will be. Well, I don't know. Maybe I think you will be.
Well, I put it this way. The sober reality of what I just mentioned, it's hit me like a ton of bricks over the past year. That it's real, that he's coming, and
That much is true for sure.
yeah, and again, I like when I was looking at the different end times viewpoints. I do not profess to be a theologian. I understand that there are all kinds of arguments for the other views. I'm just simply saying, of the ones that I've studied, the one that makes my heart absolutely sing has everything to do with just a heart full of love for Jesus that I would love to see him do with us what Adam could not.
Yeah.
And the other versions are kind of just in this kind of weird quagmire of yeah, he's reigning from heaven, but I'm like, what kind of reign was that? Because you know, you're looking at the saints that have been collected through persecution. Christians are more persecuted today. So what kind of reigning? You can't say that he outdid Adam if we're going off of the past 1,000 years as if this is something that's commendable. If anything, it's been a version of hell on earth. And you can't convince me that the devil has been restrained. That's one thing that
Right.
I'll tell you right now. You cannot convince me that we're in a period where the devil's been restrained, because so much of what he's done has still not surfaced. I mean, the people that have scratched the surface on Epstein and everything else, the true evil that has still yet to be disclosed, will become a proof point that no, hell has been with us for quite some time. So that starts eliminating some of the theological areas of cognitive dissonance for me on just my experience in the past 6 years. But it's a mystery, and really smart people disagree with me, and I'm not. This is not something that I've clung to. This is basically where I've arrived in the last week, and I'm sharing it. So that might be unwise, and I might get a whole host of comments on Clements. You got to read this book. You're a complete idiot, and that could be the case. But I just love the idea of a long period of time where we get to do what the Bible talks about, which is we're seated with Him on the throne. We are
Yeah.
seated in heavenly places.
Yeah.
And so what happens when the King of Heaven comes and occupies the land here and we get to sit with them? That
The
would be
restoration of all things.
the
The
restoration.
restoration of all things. St. Augustine talks about, in the city of God, building the city of God on earth. But you're talking about building the city of God on earth with Christ here with us, doing it with us and working with us. And that's a very, very powerful thought.
And
It truly is.
I don't think that Jesus would have said pray this way if it wasn't possible.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
I think we're going to start meeting a bunch of people that are like Anna and modern day John the Baptist that have been given this unique deposit of insight on how to wait expectantly with urgency, and all of a sudden, I'm filled with optimism instead of dread, and that's where I love the presence of God is in the midst of all of the hellscape that we see on a daily basis. I mean, the first hour of our discussion was, let's describe the current state of hell and bondage that we're still in. And do we get a happy ending? And I really think when it comes to the greatest story that's ever been told, it's obviously the Bible.
Yeah.
And we're not done with that story. If J.R.R. Tolkien can write the greatest ending from a standpoint of fantasy fiction, truly, God has to have an even more amazing ending in sight. And the term that Tolkien used was eucatastrophe.
Yes.
The
Yes.
eucatastrophe, the sudden turn, joyous turn. I think God is very, very much committed to giving us the greatest eucatastrophe that one could imagine. It's going to be better than the Lord of the Rings, I'll tell you that much. But I think in order to get there, you have to have this idea where there's no hope in sight. Where are the freaking eagles? Where are they? And I think we're there. I mean, I think we're close. I mean, when I say there, it could be, the next 10 years as far as where these things happen. But if we see the vanquishing of evil in an amazing way with Nuremberg 2.0 and a chance just to hold the door open long enough for the King that's going to set all things right. What an honor. What an absolute honor that we can participate in that. Even if it means that we don't get to do the reigning with him because of age. Just if I could be the guy that can see him in the distance at the age of 90 and say, here it is. We did our best with duct tape, chewing gum, and hearts full
Fix a
of tears.
flat.
It'd be great. It would be wonderful.
And that and to know that you stood at your post and remained faithful. That's despite the setbacks and the sins and the failings, to know that we always got back up and we did our very, very best to stay faithful to him. Ultimately, that's the greatest vindication. When Isaiah says he will bring forth your vindication like the light and your right like the noonday, that's the kind of vindication that I'm talking about, is to
Amen.
know that despite all the struggle and all the setbacks, we always got back up and we always tried to remain faithful. And and did everything we could to redeem those moments when we were less than faithful,
Yeah.
because we all have been less than faithful, all of us.
Yeah.
But getting back up and recognizing the power of repentance and forgiveness and perseverance ultimately is what it's all about. But there's no doubt, David, he has his eagles, and I think perhaps we had one on today. So God bless you.
Chris, before we let David go, he was mentioning the hellscape. Do you want to mention
Oh,
to
yeah.
him the hellscape that is being laid out for us in Louisiana right now?
Yes, yes. But just finish off with this, David. And I'm glad you're sitting down, or perhaps this comes is no surprise to you. But tomorrow, our Secretary of State will be entertaining Smartmatic, not granting a contract, not executing a $100 billion voting contract with Smartmatic, but allowing them to come in and demonstrate their system. Smartmatic, yes, you heard me right. Our Secretary of State. And I wanted to give you an opportunity. I guess, based upon where we've been in the last hour, I guess you could say this is a lighter note, although it's very, very serious. What are your thoughts on the fact that the Louisiana Secretary of State would be opening the possibility of certifying our election system to Smartmatic?
And maybe just before, just a
Yeah.
little extra backdrop. This is obviously 2 weeks after Trump gave his speech, and she's made no public statement,
Yeah.
no statement to the people of Louisiana whatsoever about her intentions to become the golden standard or anything. There's nothing to see here. A letter was sent out to the legislature that we did get our hands on that said there's nothing to see here. We put our stuff through that SAVE database, and it's all good, folks. Don't worry about it.
Yes.
Okay. So, one, I think it's beautiful that she can continue to build her own gallows. I mean,
Right.
this is Haman personified. If not for the following reasons. Smartmatic has run elections in Los Angeles. We know for a fact that based on what was going on with Spencer Pratt, elections there, that if Mark Wayne Mullen is a man of his word and they start issuing greater details onto the subversion of our election system, that LA is going to be the poster child. Smartmatic will be the poster child for massive evidence of fraud, number one. Number two, don't forget that much of the scuttlebutt surrounding Connick and information related to those 200 million voter files being collected by the Communist Party, Los Angeles, if memory serves, was ground zero. There was a prosecution that was waylaid where the best prosecutors were put out to pasture. There was basically bribe deals that were taking place. Don't forget about that. So let them sing the praises of Smartmatic as they're rolling out the red carpet, only to see all of this evidence that comes out about Smartmatic through California. I mean, you already have the indictments that were related to the Philippines and bribery that's taking on there. So, like, why would they court these folks is beyond the pale. But what it shows me is that if your Secretary of State's playing for the wrong team, what this tells me is that they're all out of options. They've got nowhere to go. They've been so hemmed in that maybe they're holding on to this delusional fantasy that all we've got to do is wait Trump out. All we've got to do is ignore him and pretend that his EOs don't matter. And yes, in our stupidity, we will court Smartmatic, which just ran the elections for an election that most people in California are sitting there going, how in the world did this nobody, I forget the names of the folks that were running for mayor, ascend? And we cut out Spencer Pratt, who was, by all polling, was the front runner, and he didn't even make it into the final election. Well, everyone knows. So I actually I'm somewhat encouraged by the fact that there's nowhere to run. And in some respects, we have been so gifted in identifying the new rebranding efforts of a dominion to liberty that no matter who you bring in, like we've followed the corporate chain of these entities, and we have them dead to rights that maybe they're not even, it's not even worth trying to create a new branding effort for Smartmatic before they come in. That's what comes to mind.
Yeah.
One other question for you that just came to mind. Do you think there's a world in which the 30-day update by Secretary Mullen is just handed off to SecWar Hegseth, and he picks up the ball there and says, look, there's nothing that Homeland Security can do. This is a matter of existential threat to the United States of America, and we are taking it from here, folks.
Yeah. So again, all I can do is imagine and dream of what the day will look like. But I think if you're going to take on the enemy, you don't announce it, you don't telegraph these things. So, what would be cool is that you have an EBS. You don't have to worry about anyone being confused as to why legacy media was cut out. You go into a prolonged period of darkness, maybe 10 days, and you're simultaneously arresting everyone that has committed sedition or treason. Whether that's now, in the next 2 weeks, September, October, I would like to think that September makes the most sense from a standpoint of enforcement. So let's say that we keep the timeline, and but it's not going to be Mark Wayne Mullen that gives that announcement. And I don't think Trump is the right person to give that announcement.
General
think
Kane?
I think it's going to have to be someone who's a rather unknown commodity, but when they speak, their credibility just shines through. It's going to have to be someone that's basically been part of this operation that just exudes credibility, and it's not easy for anyone to inoculate and say, "Oh, that's Trump's guy." So, Pete Hegseth, love what he's doing. He could be the guy, but his time at Fox News and being a person that's provided commentary kind of works against him. So, my dream scenario is EBS. Here are generals that are basically saying, this is the threat, this is where we're at, these are the enemies of the state. And then I think the people that have resources, we're talking about people that have their bunkers that are out in places that are hard to find, they'll know who they are. But I think your most insulated war criminals, give them till October before they're rounded up. And at that point, I don't know how you run a midterm under the normal calendar. And so I think what you need to have is vacancies, and you need to have arrest, and you need to have hangings, public hangings. When that happens, all of a sudden, we get to breathe this new life of accountability and hope that, oh my gosh, the impossible just happened. And now you've got buy-in from the American people that they can be a part of a new system, a new voting system, without the cynicism, which is rightly there right now.
Yeah.
Don't have a crystal ball, but that seems to make the most sense. I don't know how you can focus on an election if everyone's mind or attention is captivated by the idea of a Barack Obama being tried for treason and executed. I think you let the American people digest that. That alone will be the greatest balm for election integrity. That the unthinkable, that the one person that you would never think would be held to account, is held to account. And look, and for all the naysayers and critics and cynics, I get your cynicism, but the alternative is this: if it's not Obama, it's Trump.
It's true.
Yeah, absolutely.
Because they're going to do it.
Yeah. And seeing that happen to Obama would be balm for many people for many different reasons. Absolutely agree. Much to think about, David Clements, much to think about. As always, thank you so much for your insights today. I always find myself listening a lot more than I speak whenever you're on our program. It's such a privilege to have you, sir.
Well, now I get to tell you, you've got to edit everything that we say. It's just too crazy. Please,
Right,
no.
exactly.
Take it all out. No, look, I'm all in, man. I am just all in for whatever's going to happen, and I've passed that point of caring. Like I'm a self-admitted person who's cracked. This whole war has cracked me, and I'm just not interested in half measures or the incrementalist siren song that we're so used
Yeah.
to where we're just going to continue doing this. So I think part of faith is that we speak towards things that we want to see, and I think our prayers and our petitions are being stored up in those bowls and in heaven, and it's time to see God's vengeance. And I think He has given a sufficient amount of time for repentance, for mercy, for people to do the right thing. And I think what you're seeing, what you just described in Louisiana with your Secretary of State was okay. It doesn't get any more obvious when the president tells you you've got a problem. It's easy to say that you are knowingly going against.
No question. The timing is cannot believe that the timing of that is coincidental.
Yeah. And if
No
it's not
question.
her, I've seen emails that have been issued from clerks associations to voters saying everything that Trump said was a lie. I've seen those, and it's like copy and paste. So I imagine there's probably 3,000 form emails that have gone around from the clerks associations reassuring everyone that what Trump said is a lie. It's a lie. It's a lie. And what is that? If that's not sedition,
Yeah.
what is? And so he has basically given everyone the mechanism in prosecutions to prove the mens rea requirement of knowingly.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Because if you are asserting that something is a lie, you have to know what the lie is. So certainly there's no plausible deniability there. That's for
Yeah.
sure. Well, David, thanks again, man. It's just a pleasure to have you, and of course, we'll send you the entire broadcast so that you can selectively edit before you put
But it's
anything
Only
going
the
to be
out.
out
crazy
there.
stuff is going to make it to reels. I hold the pin on
Exactly,
that one.
exactly. We're just gonna
Oh
leave the
boy.
crazy. People say, well, David Clemens crazy. I said, yeah, but he's our crazy.
Yeah, good,
He's
good.
our crazy.
I
We love
yeah,
you, man.
I'm all in. So, but
Yeah,
thank you both. I really appreciate the time that we get to spend together, and let's do it again soon.
Yeah,
absolutely.
absolutely. Thank you so much, David. Talk to you soon.
Okay.
God bless you.
God bless. Take care.
How great was that?
Well, as usual, Danielle, the detour is really eats up the rule. We always have great plans when David comes on, and we always end up totally abandoning the script. Although I think we generally stuck to it today, but it was a very very interesting discussion. I mean, wow, wow,
Yeah,
what an insightful, deeply deeply reflective American he is.
yeah. And I also just love the hope he's carrying. I find he's carrying a different level of hope than I have seen him carry before. Now, he's said a lot of the same things, but to me, the way that he's carrying it, the belief that you can feel on it is totally different. And I love that. And I think there's no other explanation than his maybe his faith is caught up with his mind, or I don't know if of the right way to say it, but that's exactly how I feel. And I feel the same way in my spirit. I feel like it's been easier. Faith has been more accessible to me for a lot of things lately. So I don't know if you've been feeling that way, Chris, if it's something in the atmosphere.
I think it's I do, and I think it's the surrender. I think it's
Yeah.
finally just being able to surrender and recognize. Look, either we believe that God is who He says He is, or we don't.
Yeah.
And if we believe that God is who he says he is, then surrender is much easier.
Right? If
It's much
nothing else, you
easier
just get worn down.
you just get worn down, as there's this Aeschylus, the great Greek mythologist, Danielle. This has always moved me so much. He said, and the pain and the desperation fell on my heart drop by drop like blood until finally in my desperation and even against my own will came wisdom through the awesome grace of God. So I just think that finally there comes a point where you just have to surrender, to the foot of Christ and recognize that He is in control, and that we do our part in our own way, and try to remain faithful to Him and recognize that He's in control of the results, not
Yeah.
us.
Yeah. Amen, Chris. Well, any other thoughts? I do have a couple of announcements.
Yeah, no, you go ahead.
Okay. Okay. Well, tomorrow we are going to be throwing y'all a curveball. We will be coming on tomorrow only at noon, because Chris is going to go down and have hopefully a pull aside with Secretary of State Landry and ask her some questions about that Smartmatic machine and her personal reflections on President Trump's remarks, and he's even going to ask if he can see her notebook where she took notes while Trump was speaking.
Oh, I'm sure that's going to be right there at the ready. Here,
Yeah, I think
Chris,
so.
just want to let you know I was listening. I want you to know I was watching.
Yeah. So, y'all have a lot to look forward to tomorrow. I think the sarcasm may be off the charts. You never know. You never know. We may be surprised. We may
We might be.
absolutely be
We could be
surprised
pleasantly
pleasantly.
surprised, Daniel. Yeah.
Yep. So a reminder to tune in to Warrior Wednesday tomorrow at noon to accommodate Chris going to that Smartmatic demo. It will be for everyone who wants to go from 9 to noon, and it will be in the Archives building, the Secretary of State's office. And then on Thursday, very special guest, Tina Peters, the warrior, the hero, coming back to the state of freedom for the first time since she's been out of prison. So excited to have her with us to get just her reflections on, basically what I said the other day, Chris, is she can say whatever she wants in our house. Like, we can have the best laid plans of what we want to hear from her on, but what we want to hear from her on is whatever it is she wants to say. That's how I feel about
she
it.
wants to talk about. Exactly. Clements talked about eagles. God needs His eagles, and let me tell you, Tina Peters is an eagle. I'm so excited about having her on, Danielle, and you're exactly right. Whatever she wants to say, she can say it right here.
That's right. And then a plug again for our friends over at Unauthorized, the Storm Summit. I'm going to put the graphic here up on the screen. But Professor Clements is on the slate of people who are going to be speaking, as is Tina Peters. So y'all will not want to miss that. If you can get there, there is a chance we may also be live streaming it. But if you're interested in registering, it's stormsummit.us. I am planning to attend. Chris, you may plan to attend. We need to talk about that, by the way. And we'll be seeing y'all here tomorrow at noon. So stay tuned, folks. We love to hear your comments on what you thought about this episode.
Absolutely. Can't wait, Danielle. And, even when it's just you and I on the podcast, the time goes by. But when we have someone like David Clements, it really flies.
I know.
2 hours. Wow. Oh, my
I
gosh.
know.
Well, I'm excited, Danielle, and we shall reconvene tomorrow.
We shall. And just a reminder that if you want to dial in and let us know what your perspective is on whatever's on your mind, but we'd love for people to call in who have gone specifically to the demonstration. So if you want that privilege, join the Warrior Circle at join.freedomstate.us for the low price of $10 a month. You will help us keep the lights on here, help us keep fighting for you and bringing the truth. Chris, before we started this podcast, who was saying this stuff?
Did you get all that?
Yeah, exactly. So If you have come to just really rely on the state of freedom as a source of truth, we would love for you to show your love by supporting us through joining the Warrior Circle. Membership does have its privileges, one of which is you get the phone number to the Freedom Phone, and you can dial in on Warrior Wednesdays, give us your perspective, ask your questions. You can also, for conversations like we had today, text us a question in advance. So we have the opportunity to ask people like Professor Clements, people like Tina Peters, some of the questions that you all have on your mind. So anyway, you can do that. You can support us at join.freedomstate.us, or you can donate just to freedomstate.us as a one-time, and also support LCAG at lcag.org, the backbone of this organization. Chris is...
Well, Danielle, absolutely. Like I always say, Danielle, LCAG and the state of freedom, we're all you got. But guess what? We're all you need.
That's right.
God
all
bless
right,
you.
Chris. God bless you, sir. I will be talking to you this afternoon, I think.
Absolutely.
Okay, bye.
Red Zeppelin is the best kept secret, but because of us, it's really not a secret anymore. Anybody who has not been to Red Zeppelin on Perkins Road in Baton Rouge, you're truly missing out. The best environment, the best service, and the best pizza in the state of Louisiana. Go to Red Zeppelin today. Tell them the state of freedom sent you. Pokey Claw, right here in Mid-City in Baton Rouge. It's Baton Rouge's newest claw machine arcade. Jenin absolutely loves it. Packed with Pokemon gear and fun for all ages. You got to go to Pokey Claw. I love it. Jenin wants to go there every Saturday. It's just a wonderful place to go for the family, for the kids. Pokey Claw.
Thanks for joining us today on the State of Freedom. Any follow-up actions, resources, and links to our sponsors will be in the show notes. All calls to action can be taken at lcag.org. That's LACAG.org.
To learn more about our work, become a monthly subscriber, supporter, or advertiser at freedomstate.us. The State of Freedom, the #1 conservative podcast in Louisiana.